A pre-show exclusive.
Oh, here we go. This is going before the opener, isn't it?
Do a proper ASMR slurp.
A who?
You don't want to know.
Is that? Did you say ASMR?
Yes. You don't want to know.
I kind of do now. Okay, right.
It's just like
Is it rude?
No, people like whispering stuff and just making sounds like really quietly.
Oh,
I don't...
that's in the same category as like heavy breathers on the phone and stuff like that.
No, it's an actual like type of video.
Oh,
where they you go, oh, I'm scratching velvet, and then put it right up.
Is it a fetish thing?
I'm assuming so.
So
anyway,
how do you know about this?
Memes.
A likely story.
All the memes.
Shall we get onto the subject? We haven't started yet, have we?
No.
Is this all going before the opener?
Not all of this. No. Please say not all of this. And then all of it goes in.
Yeah, it's going to happen.
Well, now now it's definitely going to happen. Hello, Internet. I am Firebolt.
And I'm the Orbiter.
And welcome to episode 6 of Breaking Bollocks.
Which I'm sure is going to be awesome fun.
Before we get started on our main subject,
are you going to
do we have any follow-up?
I don't think so.
Last week it was Brexit.
Yeah, that's not gone out yet.
I think with that, we ran over a bit on recording.
I haven't edited it yet.
But I still don't feel like we talked enough about that. We weren't talking about that too much right now.
Everybody's talked it to death, I think.
There's too many details. Like, we only went through the economy and immigration, and then we're just like, oh, wait, we've recorded way too long.
Never mind. So today's subject is...
religion.
I don't know, what is this going to be, a light-hearted discussion or an in-depth and a deep kind of philosophical thing, or what?
Ooh,
what is it going to be?
It's going to be controversial.
It's going to be controversial. Just before we start, I'm going to put a disclaimer.
There are 20 subscribers at the time this goes out.
I'm going to put a disclaimer. I'm going to put a disclaimer out and say we don't have anything against any specific religion. You're all fucking idiots. So
I would argue
that's going to set the tone.
Certain religions that are worse than others, but
yeah, okay. But
we've got
to be careful about what we say about that.
Any religious people.
It's a system of thought that I
we don't have anything against the individual people that believe
in
it, unless they do something stupid because of it, in which case they're dicks.
Perhaps we ought to mention where we're both coming from with this.
Yeah,
as well.
We're both atheists.
Now, you always have been.
Yeah.
I have been a very deeply involved religious follower of the Christian nature in the past. I've been to I was in the Sally Army up until my mid to late teens. I've been to these. I
was just gonna think
they don't do this, but I've been to those
America,
healing
do they
ceremony
have
things.
The Salvation Army.
Yeah, it's pretty global, I think.
All right. Okay, I was just gonna go. Oh, you should probably explain that for people that don't have it.
It's funny though, that, like in places like Africa or hot countries, you know the uniforms that you see them wearing here.
Yeah.
They're kind of black or really dark navy blue. They're white over there, so they look a bit like kind of naval captains.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah, blood and fire. That's their motto.
That's a bit.
I'm not joking. It's blood and fire is their motto.
That sounds like the motto of a dictatorship.
It's it's supposed to be the blood of Christ and the fire of the Holy Spirit, is what it's supposed to be.
I see.
And the reason I'm saying that I come from a religious background is because I don't want people to think that I'm just one of those ignorant atheists who doesn't know what they're talking about. I've experienced
no, that's me.
I've experienced the hysteria firsthand and believed it to my shame.
So
this is going far more critical than I was hoping it was going to be from the start, because a lot of people are just going to tune out because of that. It's very Richard Dawkins at the moment.
As long as they're still viewing it, then
yeah,
we don't give a fuck.
So specific religions.
Yeah. So what are we? Are we gonna go first? Why we're atheists, or Are we going to go first? And it probably would be a good idea to first go, oh, why are we atheists? The basics of it is that there's just no particularly good evidence for a god. There's been claims, but most of them can be destroyed fairly easily with logic.
Having had some religious background, I think, and this is ironic intentionally, there will possibly be times when I will play devil's advocate, because I know the kind of mentality that is. I kind of like Terry Pratchett's take on faith and belief in things, is that if things actually exist, they don't need you to believe in them. And for me, religion falls into that category. That it's the if there was proof, if there was evidence, then there wouldn't need to be faith. Is the argument that you would get for that. But it's kind of an insane argument, because if you can convince yourself that you believe in something hard enough, it's like make believe. When you're a kid, it's magic. Yeah. It's kind of it's real to you. And when it's something that's as all pervading as
more gruesome than Santa Claus, but
yeah, in some cases, in
all cases.
I don't know. What do we count as religion? Does it have to have a specific what we're covering here? Because I would not count Buddhism as a religion. Buddhism
is a religion.
I know a lot of people think of it as that, but I would call it a philosophy, because it doesn't have a deity.
It does. Well, it's complicated, but they sort of deify a certain person.
I ought to point out that if there's some glancing going on here, we have a live audience in the room tonight.
Yes,
Mrs. Orbiter is in the room doing some work in the background. She's just waving, and she's very much in the atheist camp. Yes. So I don't know, what is Buddha? Is he a prophet? I don't know. I don't know enough about it, but as far as I know, Zen Buddhism's all about kind of being one with the universe.
Certain branches of Buddhism that are more towards a deity, and as far as I can tell, haven't researched it much. You can probably tell by how vague I'm being. Those particular ones tend to be a bit more militant.
Yeah, well, this is one of the problems for me, because to me, all religions are about the same thing, and they kind of, for me, they've evolved into something man-made. For me, what a true believer in a divine being should really be thinking of their deity as is the same thing that I think of as the cosmos. It's the entirety of everything. It's what people might have referred to as creation. The existence of everything. And if that's where it all started out, because the ancient churches used to support science and research.
Yeah, until they're like, well, we can't squeeze this into our worldview anymore, so we'll.
But at that point,
away.
That's when they're narrowing the worldview and using it to control people.
Well, they kind of do that anyway, though.
And that's where, is it Karl Marx that calls religion opium of the masses?
I don't know.
I believe it is.
I haven't read up on my Communist Manifesto recently.
Yeah, well, it's kind of, you've got to think about the origins of the word. Do you know where the word religion comes from in the original Latin?
No.
Legare, which...
that sounds... No, it doesn't.
I've seen two definitions of legare. One is to bind, and one is to connect. And I've actually read an argument from someone talking about that origin of the word earlier today, about it being about connecting and binding yourself with God. But I've also heard it referred to in terms of binding the mind. I'm
going to assume that this was in favour of...
This particular article was, yeah, but I've heard the same Latin origins being used as a criticism, because it's the same stem as the ligature.
Just looking at the origin of a word is quite petty, I think.
I don't think so, because...
Well, it only really tells you the perspective at the time.
But language is what defines our understanding of...
It doesn't have any basis on fact, though.
No, but it does give you an insight into how our language and our definition of concepts over time have evolved and where they come from. I mean, for instance, you mentioned communism. A lot of people who maybe lived through the Cold War and the whole Russia thing might just think of communism as a bad word about evil people that are run by dictatorships.
But then if you
when you
break
think
it
actually
down,
no, commune means something entirely different.
yeah, I mean it changes.
It's become twisted. It's lost its original meaning, and I think that for me is what religion has done. It's.
I would argue that both its original meaning and current meaning are bad. The current meaning arguably better.
Interesting though, because I actually like the ancient Greeks' concept of gods. They were fallible, weren't they, to the ancient Greeks?
This is a fun
They
one.
were petty and.
The amount of stories in the Bible that are very similar to stories of the Greek gods,
Yeah,
is amazing.
well, yeah, no, you can look back.
Noah's Ark, Epic of Gilgamesh,
Yeah,
the Birth of Christ, Dionysus.
I like Dionysus. Egyptian and Babylonian, apparently they were originally. Yeah, that if you go back to wasn't there something to do with the Sumerians as well? There's a lot of the myths. A lot of the myths are very similar because they tap
Flood
into
myths are common in these,
and
that's
the sacrifice of a son.
Well, that's an interesting point. Do you think that the commonality between these religions is more of an argument against saying that, well, these people managed to get different worldviews from the same story? How, if they've all been inspired by a creator or multiple creators in case of the Greek gods?
But they wouldn't have come to those conclusions in isolation,
Or is it that these stories are being told and told? Do you think that that's more of an argument in favour or against?
Against, to me, simply because the big problem is that there's a difference between taking things literally and taking things as metaphor. And to me, there's a lot that the Christian teachings get right in metaphor. But when people use texts and excerpts from things to justify their own agenda is kind of... And how can you claim a divine... when you sit down and write a Bible, when people write holy texts and claim that it's the divine word of God flowing through them, what right have you to claim that?
Yeah,
that
quite often the argument would go. I mean, sometimes in school, someone that religious will, because I don't go to church service at school. It fucking annoys me that we still have a church service for schools in a secular country. But that's another issue. Occasionally someone will ask you...
Is it a secular country?
It's meant to be. Separation of church and state.
Well, yeah, but the irony of it is that I thought that by definition America's supposed to be a secular country, but it's actually a lot more religious than Britain. Britain operates on a secular basis, but in definition is actually a Christian country. That's why our national anthem is God Save the Queen.
Yeah, but then...
A monarchy is like the monarch is supposed to be the figurehead who's chosen by God.
One nation under God in their Pledge of Allegiance, despite it being a separation of church and state.
Yeah, I think we do the religion thing better.
This isn't a competition.
Well, we managed to keep it out of the...
It's still shitty.
Okay, so on the other side of the coin...
Hang on, I was still making my point. Occasionally there'll be someone that asks, oh, why don't you go to church? And I'll explain, I just don't think there's any evidence for God, and I shouldn't be forced to go to something like that. Then if they... I mean, I've not actually had anyone really go anything other than, oh, okay. But I have heard of, in other situations, where you're actually getting debates going on, and they'll go, oh, well, the Bible's evidence. And of course, then I go, why? It's just a piece of paper that
Harry
says...
Potter's evidence of magic.
Yeah.
In that case.
It's circular logic, saying... I think I've heard an argument from Nerd Cubed in... I think it's called Anger, Buses and Equality, something like that. where he writes on a piece of paper, "This is a piece of cake," and then goes, "You can't prove that this is a piece of cake, that this isn't a piece of cake, because it says this is a piece of cake."
That's the evidence thing, isn't it? Is that,
and it's not really possible that the Bible claims that it's the word of God, whilst also the Quran and the Torah is claiming that they can't all be right. And
but
so I'm like, well,
the trouble is with that, really there's a hole in that argument in that it could be argued that they're talking about the same thing from a different perspective.
Well, how can they get a different perspective from the same divine inspiration?
They're
guided by the same thing. There can only really be one, and if there is, then it doesn't.
That's Highlander.
What?
There can be only one.
You're digressing.
I'm not. He's an immortal. He knows everything.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Have you not seen Highlander? Oh, you have to see Highlander.
What?
It's full of Queen music. It's a film.
Right.
It's about a race of immortal beings that battle down through the centuries, and the only way they can die is by having their head chopped off, and they basically battle down through the centuries until there's only one of them left. Right. Anyway.
Okay.
Slight digression, but
yeah.
There's so much to cover in this, isn't there?
Yes, there is quite a bit.
But you kind of, I just know all the arguments, and it's just, you just end up going around in circles because it is based on faith.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it's like when somebody's beliefs are strengthened by their own belief, there's nothing you can do.
There is sort of more semantic arguments made about the moral argument of God and how some people argue that free will can't exist without God for some reason.
This was where I wondered whether this
conversation
was going to go, because are we talking about God or are we talking about religion?
Both. Most religions incorporate some sort of deity that can be described as a god, or multiple deities.
But for me, it's not. I don't have a problem with the concept of there being. It's personification, isn't it? Why anthropomorphize? Why give it an identity? Why not just? Because this is one of my biggest problems with the Christian faith, particularly, is that it's all based on the supernatural. All this stuff about the Holy Ghost and stuff that's outside of our realm of experience and spirits, and it's like, I don't disbelieve in ghosts, but there's no evidence.
Well, you can't
prove the absence of something that doesn't exist.
You can't prove a negative.
Yeah,
it's called the burden of proof. If you say,
I was looking for that.
There's quite a famous argument. A teapot orbiting Mars, I believe it is. You can't prove that there's not a teapot orbiting Mars. We just haven't seen it yet. Go try and disprove it. You can't.
Yeah, but I don't have to believe in it.
Exactly.
I don't have to base my entire philosophy of life on how I treat everybody.
Well, with a creator of the universe, it's a
What if that teapot told me that gays are evil?
Then protest Australia. It's where we put all
this is where it's, because to me, even if there were a being that was responsible for the creation of our universe, even if there were, that being would still be part of what I define as the cosmos. So it would be a natural being. It wouldn't be a ghost or a supernatural thing outside of our reality. Well, it would be subject to the same laws of physics, and
it's technically possible that a deity exists. I can't say with 100% certainty that there isn't one.
Especially if part of a computer program.
The most likely deity in that situation is a very passive one, and it could be something outside our reality, because our reality has 4 dimensions.
What about string theory?
That's not within our reality constantly. The other 6 are in string theory. That's a confusing thing.
There's an 11th potentially as well, though, isn't there? An 11th.
Oh, there's potentially 21.
Is there?
Physics. But yeah, we have 3 spatial dimensions and 1 temporal. the rest are kind of, oh, well, these don't really work for our universe, but you can kind of unify it in another one, but not here. You can get a unified theory if you look at the multiverse, kind of.
There's an arrogance.
With string theory.
There's an arrogance involved when you assume that if there was a being that had created everything, whether it be in terms of just sparking an initial reaction that resulted in our universe coming into existence, or actually being omnipotent and able to control events completely, why would they really give that much of a shit about what's going on here?
There's a paradox there. You cannot be omnipotent. Omnipotent means all-powerful, right?
Mm.
This is, again,
semantic. Are we getting Douglas Adams now?
But an all-powerful being cannot create something more powerful than itself. So it is not all-powerful.
Why can an all-powerful being not create something more powerful than itself? We can create something more powerful than us. Well, it depends. Well, you've got to define power then, haven't you? Because like we can.
Well, an all-powerful being would have a power over all. You can't have something that's a power over more. That has power over more of all.
It should just all be hippies. It's like
no,
the universe is God, and just leave it at that.
That fucks me off too. Like your chakras are out of line. The people.
Oh, no. I don't mean that. I just mean like we're all part of the same universe.
Yeah, there are a certain amount of people. I mean, it's kind of difficult in censuses to get an accurate idea of this, because then you just go, oh, who's not a part of an organized religion? And then a couple of people are spiritual, which basically means, yeah, they're just as bad to me, but except they're not that organized.
Yeah, spiritual is a bit of a hazy definition for me.
Oh, fucking homeopathy, that annoys me.
I think that's off the topic, though. Do you know what actually makes more sense than anything else in terms of the sort of religion and deity worship? Is the sun worshippers. At least they're talking about something you can see and that we all kind of came from in some way, and provides for us on a daily basis.
Has a will.
Well, that's the thing. You don't believe it has a will, do you? It's just a sun. It's just a star.
Yeah, that's fun. Right, so the other argument I would go on to is, so we've established that it's kind of difficult to get a good idea of whether or not there is a God, because you can't prove a negative. We're pretty sure there's not, because there's no evidence for it. But even no matter what the actual truth is religion useful to society?
Well, one of the big problems, I think, and one of the things that perhaps convinces people and helps to embed the delusion is that it's such an intoxicating promise. I mean, I was thinking about, what is it that you can convince somebody of enough that they're willing to strap a bomb to themselves and blow themselves up for that belief? And I think if
and that
if
is
it were
quite
possible,
an extreme example. But.
Yeah, but if it were possible for me to have 72 virgins after I've died that are specifically for me, I would love to believe that.
Right.
But it's like, they're not going to be virgins for long, are they? And it's going to get boring. If you're there in heaven or in eternity with these 72 virgins, or what is it, the Mormons that believe they've got a planet each or something after they die?
Oh, the Mormons are fucking crazy. I
want to see the Book of Mormon.
I watched a TED talk by, I think her name is Julia Sweeney, and she was raised religious and was religious, from what I can tell, until Mormons came to her door. They dissuaded her, or at least started her on that path. She was religious all her life, and some Mormons came to the door and she invited them in. They were quite relieved, because usually they get the door slammed in their face.
Yeah.
And they explained their ideology to her, and there was a certain moment in that where they were like, oh, well, what's his fucking name? I think his first name is meant to be Richard or something. Some prophet in the 30s of Mormonism. I think it's the 30s. Anyway, this guy that basically found a stone tablet in his backyard, allegedly from God. And it sort of explains how, for some reason in the floods, magically they got over to America. And there were two races, an evil one and a good one. And they thought that the evil one was the Native Americans, and they used that to justify the slaughter of millions. Well, not millions.
Where do the flat earthers come in?
Oh, they're fucking insane.
But
They
is
just
that-
don't understand physics.
But what is that religion based? I mean,
Kind
they're only really one
Some-
step further than creationists to me, because when you say they don't understand physics, creationists to me don't understand physics as well, because like radioactive isotope decay proves that the Earth's older than 6,000 years or whatever.
Yeah.
So
And cosmic background micro. Wait, hang on. Which order does it go in? Cosmic microwave background.
But what do you
radiation
say?
Proves that
what
the
do
Big
you
Bang.
say to the argument that God put those things there to test us?
It's
test
just-
our faith.
It's just fucking ridiculous. It's exhausting and it's useless. And then at that point, you're just like, bye. You're not worth actually engaging in discussion with.
The thing is, though, I mean, when I was talking about what I don't like is what religion has evolved into, that kind of touches on something that should really give us hope, because evolution is a naturally occurring thing that we... I loosely use the term believe in evolution, because it's not, it's as near to a fact as anything that you can.
Yeah.
The evidence is there.
Yeah.
And that's not just physical evolution of beings, but it's also the social and cultural evolution.
Yeah.
And the problem is you would hope that evolution would weed out religion eventually if we're going to survive.
We don't, as far as I'm aware, have much of a theory on social evolution.
But
other than what
evolution
could be described as history.
Evolution doesn't work like that, does it? It's survival of the fittest, and the fittest, the strongest, isn't always necessarily the right, the correct. It's just the ones that win.
The fittest in that situation is the one that's being able to convince enough people that are scared for their life that they will go to the afterlife.
But we do live in a world now which is built on science. The technology that... So one would hope that's a good sign, in that, if that world that we inhabit now is going to continue, eventually that science-based, technology-based kind of environment. I mean, you don't just believe that. Yeah. But who was it? There was a story I heard about. It might have been one of these stand-up comedians talking about a woman who prayed when she got on an aeroplane and really believed that it was the power of God that was keeping. How does a plane work? It's like nobody knows how an aeroplane works.
I guess we'll never know.
Yeah,
I think
who was that?
That was Matt Kirshen.
Yeah,
he
that was
extrapolated
good.
a bit, and because this was a Texan woman sort of guest.
How old is he? Because he sounded really young.
He looks about 8, but I think he's in his 20s.
Yeah, check that out. He's hilarious, brilliant. There's some really good comedians. There's a lot of comedians actually that have a. I don't know of any religious comedians.
Well, there's a lot of Jewish comedians.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
But I'm guessing that a lot of the time it's the sort of outsider look, and having it sort of flipped around is the actual interesting thing. So seeing a religious comedian is a bit weird.
But at least they kind of ridicule themselves.
Yeah. I have seen one religious comedian, and that was because I was watching a video where someone ripped apart their argument. I watch a lot of these. I'm informed. Basically, I think what this religious comedian was saying is that, oh, well, if you don't believe in God, why are you angry? And
anger's a human emotion.
No, why are you angry at religion?
See, thinking back to when I was religious, what dismays me is what you want to, I don't want to change anyone's mind about, deeply held beliefs.
No, I do.
Well, I kind of do, but I don't want to come across as like a secular evangelist kind of thing. It's like, you believe what you want to believe, but for fuck's sake, really, it's like, just have the ability to put yourself, to imagine, even for 5 minutes, yourself in somebody else's shoes. Because I think as soon as you do that as a religious believer, if you can fully imagine being an atheist in today's world, I think that kind of cures you of religion. Because if you can imagine how scary it is to live in a world where a huge amount of history and current stuff that's going on including lots of death, including lots of good stuff as well. Nice people being nice to each
Something
other.
actually quite
Is based on something that somebody wrote. It's like living in imagine living in a world where everybody acts as though Harry Potter's real or Lord of the Rings is real.
Atheists are quite quietly persecuted. You don't actually hear much about, this atheist person got killed or whatever. In America, no politician will even mention support for atheists. I think one time Obama went, atheists are citizens too, you're actual people. And there is huge uproar about that. Politicians in America are afraid to actually mention atheists as human beings because there's so much stigma around them thinking that they're Satanists.
This is one of the reasons why I kind of like the concept of humanism rather than atheism, because atheism defines itself by a concept of the absence of something that they don't believe in.
Yeah, it's like I think this is a phrase Richard Dawkins using. You can't be a fairy if you don't believe in fairies.
It's like if you define yourself as atheist, you're acknowledging the existence of a concept of God, and it's like, well, why even bother talking about that? Why not just talk about human values and how we can? If
you're not aware what humanism is, it's sort of more organized atheism, and it actually works towards ethics of looking after humans and being compassionate towards humans and believing that humans can work together to actually do something.
I don't think it even necessarily kind of precludes religious belief. It just doesn't give it any reference at all.
It does,
because it's not.
But that's like trying to take it down.
But that's in the name of human betterment.
Yeah.
It's kind of incorporated into the concept.
Quite recently, I saw Ofsted in the UK were investigating illegal faith schools in the UK.
I think there was a program on about that.
Humanist UK actually got them to do that.
Yeah, it was at the BBC.
Yeah, it was on the BBC.
Yeah, well, we'll put all the links for everything we're talking about in the description, so I wouldn't mind seeing that. And
they've found a lot of disturbing stuff.
But do you know what the biggest problem was that I read in the article about that program was that I don't know if it was about that program, but it was a related article, was that one of the reasons that Ofsted's hands are tied is because the definition of a school is too loose in terms of they can't, if somebody claims that an institution isn't a school, they have a very hard time proving that it is.
Well, it's
because the legal definition of a school.
The reason they're illegal is because what they're actually doing to the children in those schools.
Yeah.
I think a number of them still practice corporal punishment and against actual laws force children to go to religious ceremonies.
Well, that's got to be proved, doesn't it?
Well, that's why they're investigating them.
Yeah.
And they've found stuff.
Yeah.
And the reason that it's a problem, and you might think, well, if they're an atheist, why don't they just keep to themselves and go to a non-denominational school? Is that where they are in that area, that's the only school really available.
Plus, kids don't always have a choice if their parents say they've got to do something.
That's an interesting thing. The rights of children to choose their own religion. Because at school, a lot of people just don't believe in it. It's their parents that force them to go to the church service, and they're just sort of like, well, I don't particularly have a choice in the matter.
But that is a fairly central kind of tenet of the Christian faith. Is the whole thing about the childish mind?
Once that sort of
Jesus supposedly said, "Suffer the little children to come unto me," because it's the whole concept that if you can get them as a child, then you've got them for life, which is not true, obviously, because I was religious and I'm not now.
I can't remember what it was on, but I think I saw in a Ricky Gervais interview, he said, if you were to have a child brought up with no mention of religion, and then at 20 years old, you told them everything about what different religions thought and what atheists thought, they would probably pick atheism.
Yes, bit of a difficult one to prove that, though, isn't it? Without conducting social experiments over a long period of time. But yeah, if you think about it, it's like, well, they're just going to be like, what?
It's ridiculous if you aren't brought up believing in that. It just doesn't make
one of the things that I don't like about the assigning of certain knowledge to a divine being, if you like, is that it kind of stifles curiosity, because there are certain things that, as a religious person, you would say, well, that's God's will, or that's God's domain. We'll never understand this. It's a mysterious thing, and it's not something that we should seek to find out about, really. Whereas that whole point of like the early church supporting science was, well, actually it's the opposite. It's all about trying to get to know how the universe works, not about just saying, oh, well, it works, and we shouldn't ask why or how. It's like, it's just God's will. It's like, well, no, we should. If the universe is some kind of all-powerful creationist force, then we should do everything that we can to find out how it works and get to know it.
They did try and do that, and then they realized, hang on, this doesn't line up with what this says. It's the universe is wrong.
But that's where science
splits off.
Yeah, because it will change based on. If it finds something that contradicts what it's already said, it will change. And a lot of religious people will point that out as a weakness, because it's like, well, it's not solid. It's not a foundation that's ever unchanging. It's like, well, no, actually, that's a strength. If you're going to dogmatically insist on something,
because the facts are always there, science wins every battle. No matter how much it's not down, the facts will always be there to study. Their dogma won't.
I do maybe agree with the philosophy that actually science has nothing to say about religion.
Well, it does, because religion.
No, because science is about evidence.
Well, certain religion,
and you can't prove God. There's no way you could prove there's a God. So
no, but you can say, well, this thing in your holy text, it's physically impossible.
Yeah, but that's not about disproving a concept of any kind of God. That's about disproving a particular tenet in a particular faith.
Religions aren't deism.
No. That's what, when we were starting out, are we talking about God or are we talking about religion? We're talking about both. God, yeah, okay, so science maybe has something to say about specific religions, but in terms of the concept of God, it's really like, it's nothing to do with... But it's irrelevant.
In its search for, if it's in its studies, it finds some all-powerful creator, then science would change to believe that.
Well, it wouldn't be belief, would it? It would be evidence-based.
Evidence-based belief.
Yeah. I've got a funny feeling, though, that if science ever came across proof of a god, it would start asking that god questions. Yeah. Like, well, what the hell, man? What's your plan?
Yeah,
you've got some explaining to do.
I was going on earlier about the sort of quiet persecution of atheists, and in a disturbing amount of countries, you can be put in prison or even put to death for being an atheist. And not a lot of publicity is brought to that. Scotland still has blasphemy laws. They've not been used since, I think it's the 1800s, might be the 1600s. I forget sometimes. And a lot of people are arguing, well, we should just repeal this anyway, because countries like Pakistan that do have a death penalty for atheism or blasphemy, they argue, well, you still have blasphemy laws, even if you're not using them. And fairly recently, refugee, I suppose you'd call it, from Pakistan, who was going to be put to death, applied as an asylum seeker to the UK, and they were denied for not being able to prove their humanism because they couldn't identify statues of Greek philosophers. It's a genuine thing.
I wouldn't be able to identify statues of Greek philosophers.
Yeah, because they mistakenly believed that the entirety of humanism is based on a few Greek philosophers.
Okay.
Because the Foreign Office has no clue.
Well, it's the Foreign Office in a Christian country, so...
Well, yeah, it's ridiculous sometimes. And the amount of power that religion
That was the thing
still has.
in Florida that 90-odd people, 90-odd state legislators, councillors or whatever, voted to put signs up in every classroom saying "In God We Trust" because they thought that would stop the mass shootings.
Oh, that's fucking annoying. Oh, there's a beautiful comparison between America and the United Kingdom. On our currency, we have Charles Darwin. On
Yeah.
theirs, they have "In God We Trust." And
Which is
they're
weird.
meant to be the one with separation of church and state.
It is odd.
Yeah. And a lot of people would argue, well, they're just words. They don't really matter. But they do carry weight.
Words are everything, really. I mean,
Yeah, but
there's the whole concept, that, and
symbolic.
I believe this in particular is that whole. I mean, I know you don't know much about sort of scriptures and stuff, but you know
I
about the
know-
story of the Garden of Eden, don't you?
I know more than a fair amount of religious people.
But you know about the story of the Garden of Eden and the, eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. I personally, and there's a lot of
I think
back
that goes
up
into
for this is that whole thing with the leaving paradise thing historically seems to line up quite well with the early development of language as a communication tool, because at the point where language came in, we began to be able to define rules, and then there's a concept of good and evil.
that goes into too much detail for me to be a metaphor.
Even if you, well, yeah, it might go into too much detail, but if you look at the beginning of the New Testament, it says, "In the beginning was the Word."
What?
The beginning of the New Testament is, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God." The Word being language, being...
But wasn't there the story of Babel before the New Testament?
Yeah, but the New Testament was... See, this is what I don't understand about Christianity. The New Testament came along, and it's like, well, why have you still got the Old Testament then? Because, I mean, the Jews still use the Old Testament.
So that they can justify hating gay people.
But surely Christians should have chucked out the Old Testament.
No, because then they can justify whatever crazy thing they want. And if it's sort of like, oh, well, you're cherry picking, well, the New Testament washes that away.
Well, the New Testament's basically just a bunch of letters.
Isn't that
Mostly. But no, literally letters to the churches, a lot of it. It's basically the 4 Gospels and then a shitload of letters from some guy who had an epileptic fit and they thought it was a divine revelation. No, seriously, this is what happened to Saul, who used to put Christians to death, but he was converted to Christianity when he had a divine vision on the road to Damascus. He used to be called Saul, and they renamed him Paul.
Do you find it a funny coincidence that all these people have divine visions while walking about in the desert for days?
See, the Red Indians had it right. They just took peyote and did their like sort of vision quests and stuff like that. And it's like at least their god's kind of nearer to nature, like kind of.
That still annoys me, but
yeah, but it's
less so than
it'll be less
organised
damaging.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the problem with that is that the New Testament obviously ends up with Armageddon.
Yeah.
Which is a worry. When you basically your religion points towards the self-destruction of mankind, and that's what you think is God's will because it's prophesied by somebody who had this divine vision, which was actually an epileptic fit, probably.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people might argue that, well, people can believe what they like because if that makes them happy, isn't that justification enough? Isn't the purpose of life to be happy?
As long as it doesn't make other people unhappy.
Well, that's the problem.
Yeah.
How much it is used to hurt people.
Mm.
And I would just argue that overall, like at some point, you have to tell your kids Santa Claus doesn't exist. If there are any young children listening, he doesn't exist.
Why are you listening?
He doesn't exist.
See,
There's your childhood
but
word.
that's the metaphor thing. See, when I grew up, I'm not disappointed that Santa doesn't literally exist because it's actually a far more meaningful thing as a metaphor.
There's a certain
because
amount
it's
of magic that's taken away from it.
Yeah, but
then I
there's a
suppose
certain
that-
amount of magic that gets taken away when you grow up. It's like you can't hold on to that. You can't be Peter Pan. It's like that. That's what religion is to me. It's being Peter Pan. It's living in,
and
A
you
promise
just
of
become sort of
Neverland.
naive and don't understand how things actually work. And I would argue that it's important to actually learn about the universe, even if it's a bit depressing at times. It's also just so wondrous. And if you're arguing of like the sense of community, you do have things like humanism if you want to be part of.
There's lots of ways to be part of a community, and there's other things as well. I mean, I was going to say stuff like meditation, I think, is a useful tool for relaxing and stuff.
Yeah, there's
about emptying your mind, and
it's useful for relaxation. But if there's a certain level of that where it's sort of like, you're just talking health bullshit.
A lot of the activities that religious groups engage in are actually beneficial health-wise in terms of like the meditation thing, when they're quiet and they sort of close their eyes and they all have a collective kind of quiet time, and that it is a relaxing, calming thing. But you can do all that. Do
normal reflection.
Yeah. You can do all that.
Yeah.
You don't need a code book. I think we've made our views quite clear.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a little bit longer to go. What can we say that we haven't already? I think people know our views on religion now.
Yes.
Where do we see it going?
That's a good question. I think it'll die out.
I hope it'll die out.
As I was saying about people at school generally just not being religious, and it's their parents that are forcing them to do religious stuff. I think once that parents' generation dies off, I
think it's an education thing, though.
Then there'll be less and less people around.
I think there's a lot more atheists
that are religious,
secularists, humanists, whatever, than people know, and even themselves. Because my conversion, my rebirth.
Don't be a twat about it.
No, but when I became an atheist, it took a bloody long time because I didn't actually realise it was an option,
Yeah.
And I know there's a lot of criticism of Richard Dawkins as being confrontational, but I think there's a role to play. And the reason I think that is because it was when I bought his book, The God Delusion, having been an atheist for over 10 years, that it actually it gave me permission. You know what I mean? I didn't think it was something that you could do. I knew I didn't believe in God, but I didn't think that it was something you could openly admit.
I would argue more on Dawkins' side. Whilst I wouldn't go up in the street and go, "Are you religious?" and if someone goes yes, start attacking all their beliefs. If someone's going to ask me, "Why aren't you religious?" I will tell them my reasons and not beat around the bush with it, because it's evil. It hurts so many people and it infuriates me. And
there will come a time.
Yeah, well, it's going to come fucking soon, and
there's always going to be insanity.
Yes, but when
but it suits
just slightly under 7 billion people are insane.
It suits the powers that be, though.
Yeah,
because the population of the planet is divided, and that gives people that makes people easier to control when they're divided.
The religious lobby has so much power, and yes,
we'll get there.
It annoys me so much.
But in a way, I suppose, saying we'll get there and looking forward to a time when it's that, in a way, is faith, isn't it? We're kind of believing that that's going to happen and hoping that it will. And
well, do you know how we know it's getting there? Because we're actually helping it along.
I suppose. Yeah.
And if a couple of people listen to this podcast and are like, "Oh yeah, I didn't actually realise that was an option."
If
even one, then I would argue that we've made the world a better place.
Yeah. Welcome to the clan.
Welcome, world. I mean, that's to make up for all the other shit we say. But
by the way, if anyone does realise that it's okay to not believe in God that didn't before,
this is
please message us, because I would be so pleased about that.
This is
I would feel like I'd
more
freed somebody from
extreme
mental bondage
than most people would like, but in at the deep end, I suppose.
Yeah, everything's got a place, hasn't it?
Yeah.
You do realise we might get a stream of hate comments, but then that will just kind of back a point up, because it's like, are you not kind of
people do that when they're afraid of it actually dying off?
You're not kind of aware of how nasty you're being to people, and that's in the name of your religion. It's like, think about it.
A good example of that sort of people being afraid that something might actually go away, and that's why they're defending it so much, is with the shooting. I mean, it's very old news by now.
Do you know what pisses me off?
It's that the NRA were campaigning against it very hard, so that's when you know that shit might change.
Do you know what really pisses me off is when people talk about a militant atheist, like somebody who's like us.
It's like
as
they
a
don't go
militant
around
atheist.
shooting people.
Yeah, I'm not blowing people up.
A militant.
I'm arguing a point. I'm not a militant.
A militant Christian is someone that goes around stoning gay people. A militant Muslim is someone that blows themselves up for the glory of Allah. A militant atheist is someone that slightly offends people with their words.
If you're a Christian and you feel that the terrorism that's being rained down on you in the name of Islam is unfair, then look up the Crusades and get back to us. You know,
payback, bitch.
No one expects the Spanish Inquisition.
That's a little unfair, but yeah.
Anyway,
actually, do you know what people did expect the Spanish Inquisition because they were legally required to give 30 days notice.
Oh, you just discredited Monty Python.
Ha! Suck it. Anyway,
should we go and watch Team America World Police?
Rambled on for long enough, and I want to get slightly pissed and watch a film. So the internet's not meant to.
Forgive you. I forgive you, my child.
You are blessed, healed, washed of your sin.
Oh, don't! You're scaring me.
the memories flooding back.
Yeah, I'm having flashbacks of a.
Anyway, I've been Firebolt.
Yeah, and I've been the Orbiter. Please don't kill us.
And this has been... Oh yeah, if you are a Muslim.
Or
Allah
any
is the
religion.
true God. Don't blow us up.
Nobody blow us up.
Yeah,
whoever
nobody blow us up, actually. If you're of any religion, whatever your God is, it's the true one, okay? We're just joking.
Yeah.
Don't blow us up. Anyway, like I was saying, I'm
scared now.
I'm going to get death threats. Have you been the Orbiter?
I have been the Orbiter, yes, I said that.
Okay, well, bye. A little...
That's my comment on religion.
Fanfare. Fanfare?
Is that us done?
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for watching. We'd really appreciate if you support us on various things, obviously subscribing on YouTube, Twitch, following us on Twitter or Facebook. We have a Discord server that you can join and talk to us and other people, and a website where you can check out blog posts.
And obviously this isn't free for us to run, so if you'd like to support us financially, we have a Patreon page where you can donate monthly and get subscriber rewards. We also have a Stream Elements tipping page where you can make one-off donations. The links are all in the description.
Farewell.
See you next time. We should have a prayer. Dear Lord.
God bless Satan. Gazorb is your true Lord. Alhazarad was. Darkness will wash over the world.